Hello, everybody. Welcome to our December RV Repair Club live question and answers. My name is Dave Solberg. I'm your managing editor, and we are getting into the holiday spirit. I've got granddaughters coming back, the same granddaughters I took drug all over the country RVing back when they were younger, and they absolutely loved it. So Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating. Hopefully you get to spend some time with your family. This year is still a little bit shaky out there, so be very, very careful. So we're going to dive into our questions right now. To start with, we have Kathy, who has a 2004 Terry Fleetwood Extreme Edition travel trailer. I can't seem to get my stove working. I hooked up the propane tank, but get nothing. Not sure how to troubleshoot. Help, please. So what you probably have, Kathy, is if you're talking about the stove top, the 3-burner stove top on there has 2 back burners that are 7,000 BTU, and the front burner is 9,000 BTU. So it's a lot hotter. It will it'll cook things faster, boil water, all that kind of stuff. So the very first thing I would look at, if it won't light, and you've hooked up the propane, does anything else in your RV that runs on propane work? Does the refrigerator work? Does the furnace work? Water heater? Anything else that is hooked to that LP line? That would be the very first thing I look at. Then that would tell me if the regulator was working or not working. And also one of the things you've got to remember that in the line of that unit, and I don't know if I have one here. Let me look real quick. Yes. No. Okay. So in your line of your LP tank, you have what's called an excess flow valve. There it is right there. If you can see that in here. And what that does is if you open that tank too fast, that the shutoff valve on the top of it, that's telling this thing that there's too much pressure than a normal flow, which is 11 inches of water column coming through it. And it pushes that spring, and it will literally shut this thing off. And it takes about 10 minutes or so for it to backfeed and for the spring to release and for you to get LP into it. So the first thing I would recommend is to shut the valve off, let it set for an hour or so, and then come back and open it very, very slowly. And then try your other components inside your RV, like your refrigerator, water heater, anything like that. See if it will light. So the next step to look at is I can't get my stove working. So the way the stove is going to operate is, first of all, you have on the stove front itself, you're going to have the 3-burner knobs, and you push those in and you'll put it to the light side of it. Some of them have a spark igniter called a piezo. So it's just a knob that you turn and it literally throws a spark into it like your grill at home would do. Other ones you have to physically light with a match or one of the little butane sticks or something like that. So the first thing I would do is I would open up the gas valve. Do you hear gas flowing through it? Have your butane lighter available. I don't even use the piezo to start with. I usually just use the butane stick. And do you hear gas coming out? Now, if you just replaced your tank, something else that could possibly happen is that you have air in the line and you need to purge that. And there's times it'll take several minutes of that going and just getting all that air out of the line, depending on how far that LP tank was from your stovetop. And so I've had times where, I just sit there and let it go and go and go. And I hear the hissing, but it's not lighting yet. And that's telling me I still got air in that line until we get to the point where it does start. If you have no air coming out, hissing, LP whatsoever, I would assume that somewhere down the line, you either have a shutoff valve. Most of those components will have something like that, or you may have gotten a kink in the line. It doesn't say here if it was working at one point. I'm assuming it was. You changed the bottle. I have hooked up the propane tank, but get nothing. Okay, so is this the first time it's happened, or did it happen before that? You might have to backtrack through the LP lines and find out if there's a kink in the line. That's not very common, but I have seen it happen at times where somebody's shoved something in a compartment, a cabinet, especially since your stove is going to be in the kitchen. You have drawers and cabinets right next to it. And sometimes when you push that in, those lines are pretty much sitting there kind of out unprotected. So it could get pinched. Otherwise, then you probably have some kind of a blockage in the orifice where the fuel line, the LP line, comes and connects to the stove. That one, then you probably are looking at having a technician take a look at it rather than starting to pull apart fuel lines. So anyway, verify if you got LP coming to the other ones. Do you have spark? Do you have the hissing coming out? Use a butane, and hopefully you should be able to get it running. Okay, and now we have David Buckman. Has a 2002 Winnebago Journey. Furnace runs fine on house current, but will not turn on at all with just the engine. So your Journey then, what you have in there is you've got a Suburban furnace, and it runs off of LP and 12-volt power. And so the way the furnace works is you set the thermostat to the temperature, and once it hits that, drops down to that temperature or within 2 degrees of that, I believe it is, it then closes the circuit, sends a signal to the module board that says, I need heat. What the module board does then to start with is it turns the fan on of the furnace, and that fan should start to run, and it will clear any of the exhaust in that burner assembly that's going from inside to outside exhaust of your RV. And then also it'll draw air from inside the RV and push that up over the burner assembly. And I have one here. I'm just going to bring it up so you can see it. So this is what it looks like inside the guts of your furnace. And your Journey, on the outside, you will have something like this, and probably a plate, a larger plate with it. So it's it'll pull in air here, runs it through and exhausts it, and then pushes it out here. So the first thing that happens is this is going to take off, and it needs to pull this switch up. This is going to be covering this, and this is called a sail switch. And so what happens is that you need enough airflow, you need enough 12-volt battery power for it to push this sail switch up. That's telling the module board then and your gas valve that, yep, I have enough airflow. Go ahead and open the gas valve. Go ahead and light it. So that, not working, I'm gonna go through some steps here that, let's say the fan does start to go, but it won't light. So the first thing I look at is probably battery power. When you say it won't run on just the engine, and it won't run off the engine. It runs off the 12-volt house batteries that are inside. And if you have the disconnect switch off when you're driving down the road or anything else, then you're not going to get 12-volt power to this. It's not going to start up. It's not going to do anything. So you have to have the 12-volt disconnect power on. You have to have the batteries connected. They have to be in good condition as well. So this starts up, and let's say it won't light at all. It's very possible that your batteries are just low enough that they don't have enough power to spin this. And I mean, this will spin even if your batteries go clear down to 5 volts, which they never should go that low, but it won't have enough to lift this sail switch. So that's the first thing I look at. Put a booster on that. Make sure that your battery disconnect switch is on, or open, so that you're getting voltage. So when you're driving down the road in your Journey, you have what's called a battery isolation manager solenoid. And what that does is it takes voltage from your alternator, your charging system of your I'm sure it's a Freightliner since a 2000 Journey, and it should be delivering about 14 volts back to that battery. So it should be getting enough. But if the battery disconnect switch is off, again, you won't get anything to this. And the weird part about it, I look at some of these questions, and there's a lot of variable questions that have to be answered as well. When you were running off a shoreline power, you probably had the battery disconnect switch on. And, so there's a lot of these little things that you don't understand, that's the biggest thing with troubleshooting, is look at all the variables. We call them gremlins. All these things hidden. What was the ambient temperature? Were you driving? Were you, did you have the battery disconnect switch on or not on? Were you having anything else on inside the rig? So try to get all those variables when you're troubleshooting to see if you can simulate exactly what was happening when you were doing the operation when it worked and when it doesn't work. So let's get back to here. Now, the next thing that's going to happen is, let's say this fan motor does go fast enough. It does lift the sail switch. It opens up the gas valve, and we hear a click, 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 click. And what that is telling us is that you've got an electrode in here that a spark igniter that is going to try and light this furnace in here, or light the burner assembly on the inside. So if it doesn't start in here, then the next thing I would look at is, it may be that your fan's going fast enough, but you're not getting enough airflow coming out the backside. If you have any of the vents covered inside that rig, it's going to restrict the airflow, and it's going to build up, and it's not going to be able to, that fan switch is not going to be able to go, the fan's not going to be able to go as fast and lift the sail switch. Go inside, make sure all your vents are open, nothing's covering them, the tubing inside is not bent, and so forth. So if you hear the thing sparking, but it is not lighting, the next step then would be to take this cover off. And to do that, basically have to pull it out of the housing itself, but you disconnect the LP tube here. And the easiest way to do that is just use a crow's feet. It's just a little angled wrench, and I think it's a 5/8 that takes that off. Take these screws off and then pull it off inside, and you'll see a little ceramic probe in here going to the burner assembly. And it's just a metal disc with a whole bunch of holes on the inside of it. It may be that that's corroded. It may be that you have, if you had that bad LP, you could have liquid in there that has formed in and it won't light. Then we're starting to get into some pretty advanced technical aspects of it. But the first thing, the simplest thing is, if it doesn't light, does the fan start? If the fan doesn't start, it's a 12-volt issue. It's either at your batteries, you've got a fuse in your distribution center. In fact, on your 2002 Journey, above, I believe, in the kitchen area, there's a set of push-button fuses, and that you have one for the furnace. Those are your 12-volt fuses, and they're just push-button type circuit breakers that Winnebago uses rather than the plug-in automotive style. Then I would also check to make sure I got 12-volt coming to here, and do you also have LP? Do you have anything else inside? When we were talking earlier, does your stovetop work? So look for those things. Does the fan work? First of all, do I hear a click? Is it trying to light? Does it try to spark? And if it doesn't spark, then we have to dig in deeper into there. It could even be a bad sail switch. It could be a bad temperature sensor, high limit switch on the backside. I doubt it's that. If it's not lighting, we're not getting any heat anyway. But my first guess would be 12-volt supply. You can check to make sure you got at least 12 volts. You should have 12.6 coming to here. Then it's very possible that if that's working, this is working, it's not opening the gas valve, probably your sail switch. All right, we'll get this back. Okay. Oops. Whoa, we got a lot of questions came in while we were doing that. George says slide locks are stuck and slides won't work. Who can repair that? So, one of the things I tell people, when they're looking to get some troubleshooting advice or, any type of repair things, there are so many variables in types of, units, mechanism, everything, especially with slides. You've got hydraulic slides, you've got electric slides, you've got Schwintek, you've got power gear, Lippert, HWH. So yeah, we really need to identify, first of all, the slides. And when you say slide locks are stuck, I'm wondering does that mean some of them have a locking mechanism when the slide comes in, you lock it to the floor. Others are just gear driven. And so, the first thing I would look at, and again, we get back to 12-volt power is one of the biggest issues that you're going to run into in an RV. Those house batteries run a lot of stuff. And if they're sulfated, they are going to give you nothing but problems unless you address that right away. So the first thing I would do is, I got people that, I do the questions for rvtravel.com, and I have people that come in all the time and say, oh, my batteries are good. Well, you don't know your batteries are good unless you fully charge them, let them sit and top off, and then put a 25 amp charge draw machine on them and count the hours. Nobody does it. So you can't tell the level of sulfation lead acid batteries are at unless you do something like that. And they may look like they're 12.6 and they're fine. And the minute you start to do something, they nosedive. They can't store the power that you need into them. So the first thing I would do in all these situations that have 12-volt house batteries as part of their operation is hook a booster up to it or plug it in and check your charge to it. When you're plugged into a Shoreline Power, your converter or your inverter, depending on what charges your batteries, should be providing at least a 13.6 if the batteries are a little low, or a 13.2 if your batteries are at 12.6. That's the maintain level. A fully charged 12.6 volt battery will not accept a charge at 13.2 or below. So that just kind of is that maintain charge till it starts to get down to a point where then it can kick in and do it. But if you got a battery that's sulfated and it just nosedives right away, that converter is not going to kick in right away. So you have this little gremlin. Put a battery booster on that or check it and make sure that converter is giving you 13.2. So that's the first thing, and especially with leveling jacks, because they take a lot of power when they first start, and they just shut off right away. Then the next thing I would look at is level the coach. That's something I always recommend with slide rooms. Make sure it's level and secure, because if you're out of level, you're going to twist the chassis, which means you're twisting the sidewall, which means now your box in there is going to have resistance. And if your motor is just a little bit weak or your power is weak, it won't go right away. So I would do those things first of all. And then again, if you can tell us what kind of mechanism you have, then maybe we can go a little bit further into it. Maybe Katie could actually post in here if we have a download tonight. We didn't talk about that, but usually we have a download that you can go into and get. I think last week we had something on maybe the traveling with pets. All right. Dave on YouTube says, happy and healthy holidays to all. Thank you, Dave on YouTube. Bill Van de Sand, I have a 23-foot 2020 Salem FXX 178BHSK. The right side on the inside view, slider motor seems to have failed. The slide out turns abruptly right after about 8 inches of movement. I can't find the controller to check the error message. Okay, so you've got a 23-foot Salem and your passenger side slide out, right side from the inside view. Slider motor seems to have failed. So I'm not sure what type of, again, we need to look at the slide and the mechanism that is in it. If it's a Schwingtech slide, it will have little gears, a rail on the side of the box, the slide box itself, top and bottom, and there are little teeth like gears. And then your motor in that one is in the sidewall itself. There's a motor at the top and a jib at the bottom guide, and it would be on both sides that it does that. And The right side slider seems to have failed. And that one does not have a controller at all. And sometimes the little 23 footers, you know, with a smaller slide out will use something like that. Or it could have a Lippert slide that is, if it's hydraulic, then it would be a hydraulic motor in one of the compartments. And again, most of these is not going to have a controller to show you an error message like you see in some of your hydraulic leveling jacks, things like that. They just basically go back to a motor. If it's an in-wall through the rail slide, again, that's probably a Lippert. It could be a Quickie slide, and Quickie, Lippert owns that as well. So the first thing I would recommend is let's identify what type of slide mechanism. Again, there's, you know, dozens of them out there, and they all have different, you know, issues with them. The Quickie one, the motor typically is right on the base of the slide with a slide mechanism or a rail that goes on the floor itself. And, you know, you probably are not going to find a controller. Now, the ones that do have a controller, the hydraulic, like the rack and pinion system that Power Gear had, and that one would be down in a compartment, but normally that's not used on a travel trailer. I think you probably have an electric one, and I doubt that you have an actual controller in that. The other thing I would do is get in touch with Forest River, who makes the Salem, and 2020, that probably could still be under warranty. Sometimes they have a 2-year, 3-year warranty, depending on when you bought it, but they should be able to help identify what that is. Gordy says, I have some damage to the edge of my fiberglass roof on my motorhome. About 2 feet of the rolled edge is cracked from a tree. Can the fiberglass be repaired, or does the entire roof need to be replaced? So what Gordy probably has on his is about 2 feet of the rolled edge, which we can see here is a Winnebago model, but a lot of companies use the same thing. So I'm assuming he's saying the rolled edge here on the side. And as you can see, this is just a fiberglass sheet. So a lot of times what people will do is they will literally zip this out, and you should be able to just repair the fiberglass on it. You know, if you don't care about the aesthetics too much, a fiberglass patch, you know, so you got 2 feet of this that's damaged along here, you could zip that out and actually do a fiber patch on the whole thing, and then just cover it with Eternabond or the Dicor lap seal or something like that. Or you can probably get in to a auto repair facility that does fiberglass work, and they should be able to do a real nice cosmetic job to it. It'll cost you a little more money, but again, you know, that's basically what that is. Now, if you're talking about the front cap, that's a little different, because the front cap is more of the molded fiberglass layered in rather than a sheet like this. That one you can do just a regular fiberglass repair patch. But I'm thinking that since you talked about replacing the entire roof material, it's probably this stuff. And then you're definitely going to want to get this back in and just they got a little tool that you want that pushed in. And sometimes I even put a little silicone in there beforehand, because if this comes out going down the road, you can get wind up underneath here and it'll rip the whole thing off. And that's why it's important to get that repaired too. If you got a crack in there, you don't want the wind coming up and ripping the top of it off. Then you will need a whole new roof. Okay. Colton says, you have a great bank of knowledge, but if I have no money in my bank, that's thank you very much, Colton. I appreciate that. It's been from many, many years of working at Winnebago, being out on the road, doing videos and researching. And, you know, one of the things that is you know, rewarding for me is to help educate people, because there's so many different things with an RV than there is with your house. You know, we've got 12 volt mixed with LP, mixed with 120, and you're rolling it down the road. And, you know, a lot of times you go in to get your your walk around, and you get about a 10-minute walk around. In fact, I had a couple 2 months ago called me up and wanted a walk around. They had paid $1,500 for a professional walk around at one of the dealerships that is a big multi-location dealership. I won't say who they were, but they got a 30-minute walk around from a kid that was they just started 2 weeks ago. So they were not very happy with that. But we did a very thorough walk around. And that's very important to do, because 50% of the failures or the calls that CoachNet gets on their toll-free hotline are people not understanding how the system works. So you can greatly reduce some of the issues if you just take some time to understand it. But again, thank you very much. I appreciate it. John adds, then it turns the sail switch on. Please bring the door on the outside of the furnace back. John, was that up? John was up here. Kathy, no. Dave. Okay, so John adds, then it turns the sail switch on. Please bring the door on the outside of the furnace back. Okay, I'm assuming this is what you mean. Okay, so this is our furnace, and it would be sitting like this in the housing. This would be like that. So to get at it, we just took these screws off. We will pull this out. What am I hooking on here? Okay, this has got to go up over. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn this sideways. And I don't know if, can you see that? Can you zoom in to that? Can you see it well enough? This right here, this switch. So that is the switch. As this spins, it needs to lift this to the point where you can kind of hear a click, and that creates the closed circuit, meaning it's going to send 12-volt power back to here and say, yep, we got enough airflow. I'll get my hand out of there so you could see it. And basically, it just clips in 2 little screws right there. Just take that out. Now, there's a way you can take it out and you can ohm to see if it works, but actually it's just cheaper to put a new sail switch in if you think that's what your problem is. So hopefully that is what you were looking for, I believe. It's nice to have props rather than doing this. I call it a puppet show when you don't have stuff you can work with. Okay. Mike has a 2008 National Seabreeze SP32B with an Onan 5500 generator with 1,900 hours. That is a lot of hours, Mike. My generator takes about 7 or 8 starts to stay running. Is it something simple like a spark plug? Probably not. What happens with the generators, even today, the generators varnish up because of the way the fuel is being made these days. If you do not run your generator once a month under full load, which means about 30 amps, then it's going to varnish inside of that. And it's going to take longer and longer and longer to start and to keep it running. And eventually it won't start at some point. And then you're going to have to tear the carburetor apart and get it all cleaned out. One of the things that I would recommend is to try a little seafoam. Onan has a fuel additive of theirs, but seafoam seems to be one of the best ones that's out there. And just keep running more of that. Look on the label itself. It'll tell you like 1 can per X amount of gallons. I think it's somewhere in about the 30-gallon range. So if you've got a larger tank, that Seabreeze, I believe, has about a 75 gallon fuel tank in it. So you might want to put a couple in it. But again, read the side of that and just keep trying to put more of that stuff in there. And run it under load. What that means is that you need to put some kind of a heavy amp draw on that, like running a roof air conditioner is going to do 14.8. That's still not 30, but it's good. If you can run 2 of them at one time, that would be good. But just try to get some stuff going. The refrigerator, what I see a lot of people do is get a couple of those ceramic heaters, because they draw some pretty big amps off of that stuff, and just hook 2 of those up, set them outside with extension cords, and let them run for a while, and hopefully that'll get that generator working enough that it doesn't varnish up. But the seafoam and the additives do help, and then keep adding that as you go along. And the biggest problem is a lot of times when people store them in the wintertime, let them set for sometimes 6 months and never run them. Then you really get some issues. Dennis asks, I have a Ford V10 that blows spark plugs. Any comments? That has got to be, and I'm not an expert on the motor side of it. I guess the first thing I would look at is, what type of spark plug are you using in that? And I know over the years that Ford and Chevy have gotten their own kind of spark plugs recommendations on Autolite versus whatever it used to be, and I haven't stayed up with that stuff. But the first thing I would do is I would check with your Ford dealer and find out what spark plug do they recommend. Is your gap right in that spark plug? And then basically you're going to have to take it in and just put it on the scope and find out exactly what's happening with it. And you need to make sure that you get as much data as you possibly can. When you say blows the spark plug, what does that mean? What is it? Literally cracking it and blowing it apart. They're threaded in there, so I doubt very much it's blowing it out of the cylinder itself. But is it sooting, carboning up? Exactly what's it doing? Under what conditions? How long does it take? What type of spark plug you have? All that stuff, and that's something that we can do a little bit more research on. I have not heard of that being an issue. More often I see where we have exhaust leaks, manifold leaks and stuff, but not spark plugs. So I'd like to, have you follow up and just see if you can get some of that information, and maybe we'll do a little bit more research on it and find out, if anybody else is having that issue. My 2000 Winnebago is a Journey G, a 36G diesel, and everything else works. I will check. Oh, that was okay. David up here, and he had what do we have? What did we have? The Journey. Oh, the furnace. Okay. Yep. So definitely check the coach batteries on that. Putting a booster on it, you'd be amazed how many times just throwing a booster on at one point in time and it works fine. That will really help isolate the fact that it's those batteries causing you the problem, your gremlins. I have to replace, Virginia says, I have to replace my Coleman roof air conditioner, but there are none to be had anywhere in the country. Is it possible to replace with a Dometic? I know I'll need to replace the thermostat. Can a Dometic unit, I just jumped on, blow through my current duct system without installing a new ceiling AC vent unit? And yes, you can switch them out. The problem that we're having right now in the supply chain, and Coleman especially, is that Coleman cannot get the fiberglass upper and lower shroud that they use in their manufacturing. There's a resin shortage, and it's not just an RV issue. It is a nationwide. If you didn't go out and buy a year and a half's worth of resin back before the big supply chain issue happened, you're in trouble. And that's what we're seeing in the RV industry with a lot of different components. Just the resin, kind of like the chips you hear about in the automobile industry. But what you should be able to do, and I've got, in fact, I have a Coleman right here if you want to come pick it. I don't know if it still works, but this is our Coleman, and I'm not going to pull it up But basically what it's going to do, the thing you're going to have to look at is your opening of that. And let me just see if I can. There we go. Can you see this here? Okay. So this is going to be your air return from inside your coach. And this is going to be your air ducting back down into it. And what you need to look at is in your duct system, there probably is a plenum in this in the roof, and that's going to divert air to front and back of it. So the main thing that I've seen in these units would be getting your shroud to fit. Now this shroud happens to be one that has the controls right on it here. It would be for one that just ducted, came right out of the unit itself. But you just need to make sure that you get the shroud as well. And you're right, you're going to have to get the Dometic thermostat that would match up with that. So couple different places that I would still check. I mean, if you want to look at getting a Coleman, PPL down in Florida has a lot of parts that they sell. I know Winnebago still has some. I'm not sure what brand you didn't say, but I know we have swapped out Colemans for Dometics and vice versa in some units. In the past, I think we did a video on that on a fifth wheel. That was probably about 2 to 3 years ago. So maybe take a look at that. But you should be able to swap those out. Just take a look at what your opening is, and whoever you're buying it from should be able to help with dimensions on that. And Katie might want to take a look at the post that here's a guide on how to buy a used RV. Okay. Next we have Todd asks, the toppers on my slide outs flap very loudly with virtually any wind, obviously when we are parked. And that's a problem. What he's talking about, he's got a unit that the slide room comes out, and then there is a top or an awning cover that goes with it, and they loosen up, they stretch, and that's fairly common to do that. There really isn't a good tightening version of that, but what I have seen is where probably one of the best things is just get the swim noodles and put 3 of them and tie them up into like a triangle and slide that in. That'll help taunt that up a little bit. I don't think you can cut those because there is welting on each end that slides into the little groove. So you couldn't cut it and try to bring it in a little further. But one of the things I might be able to look at, and again, I guess, is it a Carefree? Is it an A&E? I don't think Lippert has them yet. That's probably the only thing they don't have. But I have not seen any adjustment bringing those up. But what I've also seen other people do is just take a little clip, and as you bring it down, you can actually take a clip, something like one of these, and if you can get an edge, bring the fabric down along the sides. Let's say this is your topper here, and your awning cover comes down here, and it's just going to flap in a little bit. If you can get to a point where you can clip that a little further down, and it will tighten that up a little bit. Then you just got to make sure that you unclip it, and then you got the problem getting up and down. And the reason you had a topper in the first place is so you didn't have to get up and down and get the debris off of it. So anyway, swim noodles work pretty good to shove in and just give it that little hump and keep it from flapping around. Dale says, I have a problem with my gas water heater. the flame starts, then it backflows into the area of the wires, etc. I blew out the vent completely, and that didn't help. This is a 2019 Forest River. So the gas water heater, flame starts, then it backflows into the area of the wires, etc. So that would be this. So if I look at this, so here is the spark igniter. This is our burner tube. This is where air is going to mix into it, and it's going to go into that orifice there. The flame starts, then it backflows into the area of the wires and etc. So I'm assuming it's coming back out into this area. And I guess the first thing I would probably have checked is your regulator pressure. You need to be at 11 inches of water column, and if it's higher than that, maybe we're getting too much LP pressure, maybe not enough air pressure in that. So to me, it sounds like we're getting too much flame. It's not being, going in here. There's not a whole lot inside. This is just a completely open tube in here. So there's nothing that really can restrict that going inside there. And I don't know if you can see inside here well enough. Maybe if I turn a little bit to the side, it's just probably wide open. So you shouldn't have much in there. I guess one of the things, and you said you cleaned out what? Let me look here. Blew out completely, and that didn't help. So I'm not sure what vent, unless it's here. So I would say, if you can get a tube like this. This is what I use to clean out refrigerators, anything that's got a gas line like this or soot can build up. Hook that up to an air compressor, keep it at 100 PSI, 120 PSI, that's fine. Get safety goggles, get in here and clean this out really, really good throughout that whole area. You could be getting a soot buildup in there. It's very possible, something I guess I didn't think about is there is a spider that loves the smell of propane, and they will go in and spin webs in these. You get mud daubers, all kinds of stuff that's really going to, will affect the flow in there. So that could be something that is happening inside that area. And then, here is your vent. You can also go into here, but you may want to also look at the adjustment on this and find your owner's manual. This is the air that's coming in. And if this is closed off a little bit, you might be getting the wrong air to gas mixture in it. And so I would definitely take a look at that and clean all those other areas out. Otherwise, you're going to have to get in and do a water column test to find out what that pressure is, because it'll come out at 14, which is too high. And then the second stage one is supposed to reduce it down to 11. And that's where you want to be with your pressure from your LP line. Okay. Okay. And somebody did post that there is a gold live event about replacing your roof air conditioner. And I'm not sure if that's it as well, but that's one. And there was one where we did a replacement on a fifth wheel, and I'll see if I can find it and maybe repost it at the end of here, because I don't think that's the one that we did. It wasn't a live event. It was a fifth wheel out at the local campground that we replaced the air conditioner on. Alice asked, can you replace a Carefree awning motor with a universal motor? And I don't think I've never done it with a universal motor or some kind of an aftermarket one. Generally, they just don't quite match up as well. And I know if you call Carefree, they'll say no because they want to sell you an awning motor. But one of the things that I would be very, very careful about is when you start looking at replacing awning motors, springs, stuff like that, you really have to be careful. It's not something that is not an easy DIY job because those springs are all under pressure. And we've seen people almost take their hands off trying to pull that apart and just the load on that spring itself. So I would be very careful about tackling something that myself. In fact, we have not done a video on that just for that very reason. We've seen too many cases where it was just, thankfully it wasn't a disaster, but it could have ripped somebody's hand off and it ended up needing stitches. So that's something I generally leave out of the general repair stuff. Ann says fifth wheel and travel trailers do not have engines, but there should be a lemon law on these campers. We bought a 2016 Keystone High Country and it has been in the shop every year for one thing or another. This was after the usual 1-year manufacturer's warranty, major repairs that have cost us more than $6,000, which insurance cannot be used. And, that's something. There are lemon laws, even for trailers, travel trailers, fifth wheels. It's, it's not just engine related. It's actually operational related. And every state's different. There are some states, Florida is very, very heavy into the lemon law issues. Other states are not. It really, depends on the state itself. One of the things that, I am a big believer in is the extended warranties. And, back in the late 80s, early 90s, even into the late 90s, I wasn't a big fan of them because there was too many automobile and homeowner insurance policies that jumped into the RV industry because it was rolling and hot and they didn't cover anything. I mean, it was, so most of the stuff that's out there now, the dealers have gone through the bad stuff. So, I would say in today's world, I would find a dealer that's been in the market for a long period of time. They've weathered the ups and downs. They didn't just jump in here now in the last couple of years when everything skyrocketed. They're the ones that are in it for the long haul. They're the ones that have gone through some of the good and the bads of the insurance policies, extended warranties that are out there. I know that doesn't help you now, but insurance typically is not going to cover breakdowns in an RV. That's something that's more in the liabilities and accidents and things like that. It's also a good reason to buy an insurance from a company that is an RV specialist, that have programs designed for, replacement cost coverage or agreed value or full timing and there's so many different policies that you'll be covered better. And it probably will cost you less. But again, most of that's not going to cover this stuff. So that is where some of the extended warranties do come in handy with this stuff. And I would try that. Where we're at, we got about 10 more minutes. And so we're out of questions here. So with that, I want to show a new product, a couple of them that came by, and we did a video on a couple of these. And one of the things that, just about everybody that RVs is looking for some type of Wi-Fi service. You go into the campground and they got one router sitting in the office. And if you get a signal past 50 feet, you're probably pretty lucky. So there's a lot of programs out there. I've tried the satellite programs. I've tried the cell phone programs. Just about everybody has one. And we came across this. It's called Travelify. And it is just a small little coaster size hotspot. And the nice thing about this is that you don't subscribe to a cell phone company program with this. You buy data plans, and they use the top 5 cell providers around the country to get the strongest signal in the area you're at. And I've used this in Texas. Last week we were in Colorado. I tried it up in the Estes Park area. Got wonderful downloads with it. Had no problem whatsoever. And the thing that I like about it is you can buy the plans as you go. So let's say I'm going to RV for 2 months, and then I'm not going to RV for the rest of the year. I don't have to buy a 2-year contract. I can go month by month. Now, one of the things it does have, if I buy a 1-month plan and I let it lapse and I don't renew it within a few days, I will have a $10 activation fee on that. I just found that out here recently, but it's still a lot better than having to go a 2-year contract. And the signal strength, and all over the country, it's been very, very impressive. I plugged this thing in, charged it up, and I went 3 days before it, I needed to recharge it again. So it does have some pretty good longevity in the charge system, and handy, really, really nice. Okay. So Don just emailed in. He has a 2017 Fun Finder, 21 foot. The AC cannot keep the trailer cool on hot days. Runs continuously, lots of condensation coming off the roof, but the unit will cool down at night. The interior temp does not come down to preset temp. Is this normal? Well, so, you got a 21 foot Fun Seeker. You got one roof air conditioner in there. And the thing you got to remember about roof air conditioners is they can only cool the inside of the coach down about 16 degrees, what your ambient temperature is. So the thing you need to do to find out if your air conditioner is actually running as designed is to get a temperature sensor and check the ambient temperature. What is the temperature that's being drawn up into that air conditioner that we just saw? Because that's going to come in, it's going to get pulled through your evaporator coil at the front of it, and it's going to flash with the coolant that's in there, and then it's going to dump it back down inside. So it's going to pull the moisture out of it too. So now when you're saying there's tons of condensation, what that's telling me is that you have some pretty moist air inside that RV. So the drier you can make it inside, the more roof vents that you can open and get some of that warm, moist air out of there rather than going up through the air conditioner, it's not going to be able to efficiently cool that down from what you have just standing there. So the things you can do to make it run more efficiently is, first of all, try to park the unit where you may be able to get some shade during the heat of the day. A lot of these little travel trailers, he said it's a 21 foot, I believe, Fun Finder. I would bet that it has a 2-inch roof. So that means you got 1.5 inches of insulation. You got 1.5 inches on the sides, probably and even if it might be loose fill insulation versus block foam. So you probably, even at the best, you're at an R9. Worst case, you're probably at an R5. So you don't have a lot of insulation that's helping you with that RV. So one of the things that I have seen that people can do is, and you also probably have single pane windows. That's going to let a lot of the cool air that's trying to come in, it's going to get heated up. So if you can put a little bit of that reflectance type material in the windows, or get some kind of an insulation in there to help that. There are some companies that have a roll-on or spray-on topper that claim to help add to the insulation of it. Most of the research I've done on that, they add like 0.5 R, which is not going to help you much. The only thing it would do is if you had some gaps and you had some cracks in some places, but then you would have leaks inside of it. So the next thing I would do is try to get the moisture out of the inside of it. And that's going to be by air circulation. Get those roof vents going, move some air on the inside of it, put some damp rid in some places. Try to get as much moisture out of that rig as possible. Don't cook inside of it. Don't put wet clothing in, swimsuits and that type of stuff. Anything wet, get it out of there, because you got a lot of condensation. So you're fighting a lot of things in that rig. So there are some things you can do, but test the temperature. Get that temperature, a thermometer. What is it doing coming in? What is the ambient temperature? And as it comes back out, what is it blowing out? And you should be about 16 degrees difference in that. But think about it, if you continuously have hot, moist air in there, it'll take forever for that stuff to do it. And that's why it's working all the time. All right, we got a few minutes here. Jim asks, have you ever installed a system to record your side and rear cameras? I have not. I've installed rear cameras. In fact, we're just doing a little bit of research on somebody that has a Winnebago, and they had a Voyager camera installed, and it got damaged and ripped off, and they want to put a Furrion in it. So we're helping with some wiring and stuff in RVTravel.com, but I have not put a record system on the side. And I guess I've never really known the reason to do that. I mean, I've never had a reason to do that, mostly for recording purposes. They're great to have to see moving side to side. I would imagine security camera. Now, one of the things I have seen a lot of people do is put like a ring system on the side of the camera to be able to record if they're going to be at a campground for a long period of time, or they're going to leave their campground, because the ring will actually record, but you have to have an internet signal and you know hooked up. So the Travelfly would be good to have to be able to hook that up and do it. So Byron Hundley says, I have a 2013 Jayco Greyhawk 31FS. I've had issues with some of my wiring blowing 12-volt fuses. I was able to trace down the individual connections causing the issues and disconnect them, but I'd like, excuse me, I'd like to trace down the wiring which is in the ceiling. Ew. My ceiling is covered by the kind of white cushion material that seems like it could be pulled down, but I'm not sure how easy it would be to put it back up. You got one of two things on the ceiling. If you've got a white cushion material, it's either the fabric type of closed cell material, or it's a padded vinyl, and both of those are applied with a glue. So you pull that down and you're going to have a really tough time putting that back up. Now, one of the things I have done in the past is when I've had some of that material that the glue is actually let go and the material has bloused down and it's sinking in there, I've been able to disconnect that stuff, clean it all out really well, apply some more adhesive to it, and then what we did is about every 4 feet, we put a wood brace across that. And the first thing we did is we took a big sheet of plywood, thin, like 1/8-inch plywood, put a couple of 2x4s up and applied pressure. So the glue had a chance to adhere for a little while. And then we went back in and put those strips so it had something holding it up, because you got Luan backing that you can literally screw up through. Make sure your screws aren't too long so they don't go through the top of the roof. But that's what we added to that, just to give it more brace and more support. And it actually looked like it was part of the original design, because we got wood from a Home Depot, little wood strips, and then we stained them the same color as the side cabinet, so it really looked nice. That's something that you could try. If you want to pull that stuff down, I would be more likely to try and get a hold of Jayco, who is now part of, I believe, the Rev Group, and just see if they have any wiring schematics. Because even if you pull that stuff down, you're not going to see the wiring. Normally, that wiring is going to be routed from the top side of that. So I remember when we pulled our header down of it, I didn't see any of the wiring in there at all. So I think you might have some trouble doing that. What you might want to do is to just run new wiring and run it in the compartments. Any place you got an opening, like let's say an entry door or something like that, you could put just a little tube runner in there. I have seen where people have gone down underneath the chassis and come up in places. So I don't know that you want to pull that down. So with that, we're at 5:01. So I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. We've got a couple follow-ups here that maybe we can add some information to that. And we'll see you next January after the holidays. Hope everybody has a great chance to enjoy some time with their family and their friends and enjoy the holidays. I know I am going to, and Angie's going to with her new baby, and everybody's doing fine there. So for those of you that have joined us in the past, and Eli, but what's Elijah. Can we call him Eli? All right. Eli Manning. I'll be Cooper. No. Okay. Thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. Have great holidays, and we will see you next month. Da-da-da-da.